Hi, I'm Rob Patz.
And I'm Kristen Stanton.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, is the Rob and Kristen Show. You know, it's going to be a great week because this week we get to interview a Buckeye.
Hey, can't get any better. Sorry for all the rest of the authors. You can't get any better than when you're talking to a Buckeye.
That's it. OH.
I-O.
So this is always so much fun when we get a chance to kind of dive into writers and just I'm fascinated by their mind because they think differently than the rest of us.
Well, everybody thinks a little bit differently than you do.
Well, yeah, I knew that's where we were going. I set myself up perfectly for that one. I did. I can't believe it.
No, but you're right. They do. And I love hearing just the creativity in their minds and how they come up with their story ideas. And they're not really even afraid to tell us that they talk to themselves in the middle of writing their books, that these people are having conversations in their minds. For ordinary people, if you're going to say that there are voices in your head, people would want to have you checked out. But not these authors. They
I talk to myself all the time. You know that. I do. I look in the mirror.
It's a sign of intelligence.
I go like that. I go, you. She's laughing because she knows it's true.
It is true.
It is true. So, hey, listen, I'm super excited about today's interview.
It is going to be so much fun. I can't wait to dive in and find out all about what is going on with Rachel Hauck. She is an award winner, like multiple awards. I'm not even going to try to name all of them because if I do, I'm going to miss something. But she is a best-selling author and she is a great writer. And she, at least for part of her life, was from the great state of Ohio. Welcome, Rachel.
Hey, y'all. It's good to be here. And I just got to say I-O.
There you go.
OH.
Absolutely. How are you doing and what's going on in your world? Because I think you're in Florida, right?
Yes, I live in Central Coastal Florida. I'm doing good. And I just want to shout out to these guys, to everybody out there. I had a schedule clash. I'm going to a wedding, and so I don't normally dress quite this fancy. But they did a little adjustment for me. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. So we're headed to an afternoon wedding in Central Florida outside.
Ooh, that's going to be a little warm, maybe.
A little warm, but we're on the coast, so we always have that breeze.
So tell me, and I love to ask everybody this because it's so interesting hearing a writer's journey. So tell me about how you got started in writing and what made you want to become a writer.
I always wanted to write. I was a reader, and anybody's listened to me talk about this at any length. I started a diary when I was 6 years old. I actually wrote in it. And so I've always been a journaler and a little bit of a storyteller. Not so much that I told lies and got in trouble, but if I was telling you the story about something that happened, I was going to get your engagement. And my dad would say, Rachel, you're a writer, be a writer. So when I went to Ohio State, I majored in journalism. But I didn't really want to be a journalist. I just liked the discipline of it. And when I graduated, I actually got a job here in Central Florida in computers, which I knew nothing. And it was the 80s, so everything was proprietary. There was no such thing as a laptop. And of course, no smartphones, no smart nothing. And I was a trainer, so I traveled for 4 years. And I think it was just a great time in my life to experience other cultures and other people. And I always say I was writing stories on all those journeys and along the way. And every once in a while, something that happened to me on the road, I'll pull into a book. And then I got married when I was 31. And after a year, I felt the Lord said to quit your job. And my husband came to me separately and go, I think you were supposed to quit your job.
Wow.
And we had just bought a PC. And so I started writing. Christian fiction was in its infancy, Kristen, and we were just starting to really see those Gilbert Morris books, the Brock and Bodie Taney books. And of course, we had long been in the Jeanette Oak books. And so we're into Ted Decker. We're seeing some of this come up, and Frank Peretti. And so Christian fiction was starting to explode and really expand. And that's what we started reading. We didn't have a TV. And so I thought, I'm going to write an epic World War II novel. And my father-in-law served in the Aleutian Islands, which was not very exciting, but I just did this epic World War II novel set in Ohio, set in the Southern Ohio. And that's what got me started.
Okay, so you wrote the book. So how long did it take you from when you said, I'm going to start writing a book, till I have a publishing contract and I have a published book?
It was about 9 years, but I didn't write that whole time. So I wrote that book, which took me a couple of years because I had no idea what I was doing. So I started in 93, and I went to Write to Publish in 97, met Diane Mills and started seeing what it would take to be, and Davis Bunn was a huge mentor of mine, as well as Diane, and joined American Christian, what was then Romance Writers, which is now American Christian Fiction Writers. And I went back to work. They called me and said, would you come back, please, and test for us? So one thing led to another. Next thing you know, I'm a manager. I'm managing the Road Warriors and all the installations. And finally, I did get a book contract with a woman named Lynn Coleman to write a heart song, which I did not think I wanted to write. And so that World War II novel was in the closet, but that was my only closet book. And I think I got about 5 rejections on that one. And so I came in through an offering by Lynn Coleman, and I came in writing a heart song, and it took off from there.
Now, during that time, before you had your first contract, when you were getting the rejection letters, did you ever feel like, oh, I just want to quit?
I probably did. I remember thinking, dang, this is hard. And, in the Christian fiction market in those days, you didn't have to have an agent. And so when I started looking at the broader general market in New York, you had to have an agent. And to be honest, I really didn't know what I wanted to write. So when an opportunity came to write sweet romances, I said, okay. And so that's kind of, if I had any advice for a writer, is don't be in too much of a hurry. I know we all feel like it's because it takes so long to write a book, and it takes so long to get it published. It takes so long to get it to the public. We think, I got to start now. But kind of take a moment and figure out your voice and figure out what you want to write and what are the stories that you want to tell. That was the journey that the Lord put me on. But I think if I had had a chance, I would have waited. But then Chick Lit came along, which really was my voice, which was really who I am. And so I started with a trade size Chick Lit called Georgia on Her Mind. And so that was really what kind of launched it all.
So what advice would you give to a writer who has experienced the rejections, and like you had said you had at the beginning of your writing career, and just doesn't know what to do next? What advice would you give them?
Keep writing, keep learning, keep writing. I love, there's a quote by Brandon Sanderson who said, even if he wasn't published, he would keep writing because he loved the characters in the worlds he created. They were his friends. They were his community. But keep learning. There's a reason why you're getting rejected. And I want to say this. I have worked in the last couple of years with authors that we were actually writing a book together who had not quite gone the rejection route. And I remember thinking what would have helped them in the process is a little bit more rejection. Because when you get notes back from an experienced author or editor, you can't get your back up, and you have to understand how to do the things that they're asking you to do to the manuscript. And also, I think it makes you more tender. It just helps you. Oh, I know we hate the rejection process, but it really is part of becoming a great writer. So get in there, go to conferences, study the craft, read a lot, and figure out the stories that really resonate with your heart, and then start writing them, perfecting them. Just keep going.
So I want to talk a little bit about your new book that's coming out, or that I guess it's out now, July 15th, it looks like it was release date. The Sands of Seabloo Beach. Now, you had me at the beginning because it was originally set in Ohio, and I was like, oh, this author knows something about Ohio, because you were naming Ohio newspapers, you were talking about Cedar Point, you talked about Ohio State, and so I knew that you knew something about it. And then it takes a little turn when your main character, one of your main characters, moves to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really super interesting. So tell me tell our viewers a little bit about the book, about how you came up with this idea of writing the Sands of Seabloo Beach. And don't give it too much away because we want them to go get the book. But tell us a little bit about the book itself and about your characters and what you like the most about writing this book.
Well, Seabloo Beach was invented in North Florida. It sits in North Florida's fictional town, about in that Destin area.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you can see in the background there, there's Meet Me at the Starlight. And this is about an ancient skating rink. And it is set in Seabloo Beach. And once you go to all the trouble to develop a town, I thought, I have got to do another book here. So there's a little motel called the Sands. And of course, there's a little double entendre there. And so we did the Sands of Seabloo Beach. And I just wanted to revisit the town. And it's 40 years after the Starlight. And the town has grown as that whole North Florida area did from the 80s into the 21st century. So I thought it'd be great to set a story back in that town. And Emery had one of the best summers of her life in Seabloo Beach. And it was also the worst summer of her life. So this is a then and now story. It's set in current time, and then we flash back 16 years to meet Emery and the hero Caleb when they're both 16. They meet on the beach, and they're just instantly taken with each other. They become really good friends, but they're both facing a lot of tragedy. They're both facing news that's about to just rip their heart out. But don't worry, reader. You can handle it. I make sure you guys can handle it, because I hate those books too, where your heart's ripped out, you don't know what to do with yourself. And then they lose contact with each other. But 16 years later, Emery's, because at this big change in her life, so is the hero Caleb. He's come back to town after living in Seattle to help out when his mom got cancer. And she came back because, frankly, it's the only job that's available to her. And so she's going to face going back to Seabloo Beach, where she heard the worst news of her entire life. That's impacted her for the last 16 years. And so they're both she's dealing with a blended family. He's dealing with the loss of his sister, who just ran away from the family. But when they come together, they realize, hey, I still love you, but how can I love you 16 years later when I only knew you for 8 weeks? So I love the then and now storyline. I love writing Caleb and Emery at 16. And it was just super fun to relive my own teenage years a little bit, even though they were in the 70s.
Well, it's really interesting. And I loved how you kind of had these little moments where you went back and then moved forward into present time. And it really seemed like the way you wrote the book, it's like they picked up right where they left off, 16 years earlier. And it's like not a day had gone by when all of these things had happened. But yet they still interacted like they just saw each other yesterday. I loved that about the way you wrote the characters. I thought it was amazing. So
yeah, doing that because I told my husband one day, I said, I think everyone's my friend. And he started laughing. He goes, you're just now figuring that out? And so really, when I start a book, that's kind of my approach. They're my friends. I want them to be your friends. And really everyone, almost all of my characters, the moment they meet, they're friends. So I think that's really what they did know each other. But when they meet 16 years later, hey, stranger, it was a stranger who was a friend.
Right.
So you come right into their story.
So when you sit down and you plan out your books, do you plan them out from beginning to end, or do you have a plan, but then maybe it takes a little bit of a turn when you're writing?
Yeah, I do have a plan. This book took all kinds of turns, Kristen. Caleb originally started out as a guy named Pete, a tatted boxer. I thought, I'm going to explore this, because he just kind of walked onto the page of my mind, and I saw him and he was talking to Emery, and I thought, wait a minute, you're kind of interesting. I want to talk to you. But as I kept planning his story and realizing what his story would be, I'm like, I really just don't think this is going to float well in women's fiction. So I'm going to back off from that. And I don't think that I really want to write it. And Pete, you were really interesting, but I'm going to put you on the shelf for now. And so my dad was an architect, so I love that world. I love HGTV shows. I love architecture. So I just went back and just said, I'm going to make him an architect and make him a guy who really cares about his town and really cares about his family. I love that about him. He really cares about his sister, and they have this rough relationship, but he really wants to heal it. And so that's part of his story. So yeah, there were changes. And I think throughout the writing process, there were letters that 16-year-old Emery wrote to Caleb, but we cut those because they really didn't add anything. So a lot of times in drafting, you're just figuring out the story. You're figuring out the emotions of the characters. And that's really where I live. I love all the external stuff. That's really important to me because that drives the character to deal with their internal stuff. But once I tap into their emotions, I'm singing. I love that part. I love good dialogue. I love going back and forth. There's a great scene. I don't think it's much of a spoiler. Maybe it'll pique your interest, where the town is fighting. There's the East End and West End now. So for those of you who've read Meet Me at the Starlight, they're fighting, and the West End is just taking over in this old, beautiful historical part that has royal roots in another series of mine called the True Blue Royals. They're just going to like wipe it out. And Emery and Caleb are like, no, I don't think we want you to do that. And she's in charge of the dying newspaper, the Seabloo Beach Gazette. And they're in this town hall, and this big money man says, he's going, Caleb, I need you to develop a golf course for me. Yeah, come on board with me and develop this golf course. And as they leave the meeting, she goes, he just George Bailey'd you. He's just like Mr. Potter. Don't you want to make $20,000 a year? Go to Europe, buy your wife new clothes. He's like, he did not. And there was this instant camaraderie, and that like opened up the whole story for me. That like changed their whole relationship and got me to the heart of them being real with one another. So it's super fun.
I love that. I love that. So what are you working on now?
Now I am working on an independent book called To Win a Crown. So in between the Fifth Avenue Story Society and The Best Summer of Our Lives from Bethany House, I wrote a couple of royal books, and there's supposed to be 3, but I quit at 2. So, because, something came along that I felt like I needed to take. And so I do get letters occasionally going, can we please have Scotty's story? And Scotty is, I couldn't believe I did this trope, Kristen, but Scotty is the secret baby of this queen of Lockton Land that I made up in an island country in the North Sea. I'm like, oh my gosh, the secret baby trope. So she's, she's supposed to take over her family's business, but all of a sudden she realizes there's this whole other world that I haven't explored. And so I realized I needed to explore that story. So it's called To Win a Crown. It'll probably be out to readers next March. Will take me a while to get back in the royal groove, but I think yes.
Well, I hope that everybody goes out and picks up this book, The Sands of Seabloo Beach. It is so interesting. I love it. And of course, you're taking me back to an area, even though yours is fictitious. We spent a lot of time in the Destin area going on vacation when I was a teenager. And I was like, it just makes me want to move to a town where I can just ride my bike. And when you were talking about that in the story, and it just super interesting. And I love the plot. I love everything that's going on with the characters. And thank you so much for writing the book. And thank you so much for being a guest here. Oh, you have a question, Rob?
I have a question before you wrap up.
Come on, Rob.
Okay, so Rachel, here's my question. If you were stuck on a deserted island and you had to have one of your characters live with you for 30 days, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's a great question. That is a super great question. Oh, I think I would have to have Jade from the Songbird novels that I wrote with Sarah Evans, country music artist Sarah Evans. I think I would have Jade because she really lived through a lot of stuff and she was tough. And I think she would say, Rachel, stop crying and start building a hut.
There you go. See? That's it. Awesome to have you with us, Rachel. Thanks so much for being with us on the Rob Kristen Show. As you can tell by the smile on Kristen's face and our large heads in these windows, it's time for another author interview here on the Rob Kristen Show. And as you can tell, she is super excited. And it means for me that I have very little work since I don't really read. I
think that's your favorite part of these shows is, hey, I don't really have to do much work. I can disappear and I don't know what you do while I'm interviewing people. What do you do?
I am behind the scenes. I am like the wizard in the Wizard of Oz. I make sure everybody looks good and everybody, gets all the things on the QR code and everything So that's my job. I am the Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Hey, we've had really a lot of fun interviewing some seasoned, I don't like to say older writers, but it's also
Experienced.
experience. There we go. Over this last year, but it's always fun when we get a chance to interview somebody that is, well, in a way, new because this is their second book.
Oh, it's so much fun. I love, Rob, you know how much I love to read, but I love being introduced to new authors. And when we were contacted about doing this interview, I said, yeah, that sounds fun. I don't know anything about this author. And so for me, it was so much fun to just look to see what kind of books she writes. And it's going to be so much fun talking to her and getting to know just a little bit about who she is and what kinds of books she likes to write.
It is. It's going to be a lot of fun. And welcome to the show. And she's got her tea. I don't see the tea, but I know she has it
Got it
there.
right
There it
here.
is. There we go.
So tell us a little bit about your book. Now, I have here a copy. It's called Shadowed Witness. And this is book 2, right? That you've written and published.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit
Yes.
about the book and don't give too much away.
Shadowed Witness is the second book in the Secrets of Concaid series. If readers, the books can be read standalone, but if readers read book 1, they probably remember Allie. She was the little sister of one main character, best friend of another, and very fun character that demanded her own story. So she is the main character of book 2. But as the story's opening, Allie has been dealing with some significant health issues that she does not know what's going on. And she's not telling anybody about it yet. But she comes out of her photography studio one evening and witnesses a murder in progress. But she ends up getting basically knocked out by the killer. And when she wakes up, nobody's around. No killer, no victim, no evidence that a crime occurred. So she now has to figure out, did I hallucinate? What's going on? Or is there a murderer running around town that we need to bring justice to?
Wow, that's quite an interesting way to start a book. I love that. So tell me a little bit about your inspiration. Like, what inspired you to start writing?
I have always had an interest in words and story. As early as I can remember, my dad was telling me stories. My mom was reading me books. She read the whole Little House on the Prairie series, A Little Princess, things like that. And I have a lot of good memories surrounding those things. When I was growing up, my dad wrote some middle grade books. So that kind of opened my eyes to, hey, normal people can write. And then I kind of let that go. I played around with it some growing up, but after college, I had an idea for what turned out to be the first book in this series, Secondary Target, and just thought, that would make a good story. Let's see if I can do it.
Mhm.
And so that's how that came out. And I just really fell in love with writing, the writing community, and yeah, all of that.
So how did you end up getting your first contract to get that book published?
So when Secondary Target was essentially complete, I went to my first writing conference, the Mount Herman Christian Writing Conference in California. And there I learned first that I didn't know as much as I thought I did about modern writing styles and things like that. So a lot of stuff I had to go back and be like, okay, first couple chapters were pretty much had to go in the garbage, but that's
Aw.
okay. That's how it works. And story was much too short, all of that fun stuff. But there I also met several other writers that were further along in the journey, who were very encouraging and willing to help someone along to figure things out. I met my agent there. We signed a year later at the same conference. And then I was with my agent for a couple of years before we got a bite. But in October of 2022, I got a call from my agent saying, "Hey, Bethany House is interested in your book." And yeah, so that's how it happened.
So did you read any particular authors growing up that influenced your writing style?
I don't know if there were so many growing up that did. I always enjoyed mysteries, Boxcar Children, Sherlock Holmes, the Mandy series. But after I got out of college, I discovered Terry Blackstock and then Lynette Eason. And I'd say their books probably had a lot more impact on me and my current writing style and genre.
So what is one thing that you really hope to accomplish yet in your writing journey? Like if you had that one, oh, I really wish that this could happen, what would that be?
Don't know that I've thought too much about that. Honestly, I would really just like to be able to be faithful with it, and for my books to have an impact on others in their faith walk, whether that is encouraging them not to let go of hope or any number of things, because God's really amazing about pulling things out of our stories that sometimes we didn't even realize were there that
Yeah.
speak to people.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I love so much about reading Christian fiction, is because there usually is some kind of thread that is woven throughout the story. And it does, even if it's not hey, here's a Bible verse, there's always something that directs you back to God. What would you think your thread in Shadowed Witness is?
Both of my main characters have a little bit different journey, but for Allie, which is more of where the story's focused, it is to hold on to faith, to trusting God, even when you're dealing with really hard times. Whether that's, for her, medical issues and, run in with a killer. But it can speak to any number of things in our lives that are just very difficult to work through, but to consciously cling to hope and to trust God to do what he does.
I love that. And we talk all the time here on the Rob Kristen Show about, God has a plan. And so sometimes when we don't understand what that is, that's really where it requires us to have faith and just to walk in that faith. And a lot of times we can't see it. And sometimes, honestly, we look back and we still don't know what God's plan was or purpose was for us going through something. But then there are those times where we can look back and we can see, hey, you know what? I see the way God had moved. And sometimes it's us walking through things that we don't want to walk through. And God is still there and he's still guiding us and directing us in everything that we do. And I love that you bring that into your books. I really do. It is one of those things, sometimes people will pick up a book when they might not be willing to walk into a church building. And so I love that is such a great way to draw people to Christ. And, I love that you're doing that. I really do. So tell me, are you working on something now?
So I just turned in developmental edits on book 3 of the series. So that is with my editor, and we're in the middle of that process.
I give you guys so much credit. You have so much creativity to be able to write these stories, and I don't know how you do it. I've talked to some of the authors who are, they're 2 series ahead of where they're at, the book that we're talking about. And I'm like, I don't know. Do you even remember the book? But I am so excited for you, Angela, in your journey of writing. And I love the fact that you have so much to give in your books and through your work. And it really is a ministry. And I hope that everybody goes out and picks up this book, Shadowed Witness. We have the QR code that Rob has popped on the screen a few times. Yes, right there. Right in the middle of, Rob, if you move your head just a little bit, there you go.
Feel like I'm in the witness protection program. So from the first two books, you have to pick a character from those first two books, and they have to rescue you on a deserted island. Who are you counting on to rescue you?
Probably Eric. He is the male main character in book 2, but he's a police detective and has a few skills and connections with that. So he's probably well set.
That's a good answer. You know, you can't go wrong with somebody who has a lot of connections like that. So I love that. Angela, we have loved having you here on the Rob Kristen Show. And thank you so much for sharing with our viewers your books and the things that you are doing. We love that.
Thanks. I've really enjoyed being able to talk with you today.